Welcome to the Peak Performance and Peak Satisfaction podcast with Master Executive Coach Sherry Gregoff. Sherry helps business people perform better, get rewarded handsomely, and actually enjoy their work. After having her own career turnaround, she now helps other high-powered business professionals experience the same. Join the movement to work differently.
Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here. If you feel a bit haunted by difficult experiences that you may have had in your career, it's time to extract the value from that work trauma and release the rest. Whether you were overlooked, abused, discriminated against, demoted, or fired, there is something to be learned from that experience. There is also a way to heal so that you stop limiting your own potential going forward. Bring your work trauma stories and let's put them to work for you. Before we jump in, I want to shout out one of my clients who had a win in this area. Here is the quote from her. "How I was treated at work, the steamrolling, sabotage, and gaslighting made me believe that because of my gender and skin color, that I would never reach my full potential here. I felt like an easy target, undermined, and losing face. But now I shifted to warrior mode, finding my resilience, using coaching as my lifeline to take my own power back over the situation." This client came to me in tears, having just been verbally railroaded during a meeting with leadership and her peers. The meeting ended and she was flooded with visits and messages calling out the behavior as inappropriate and expressing support for her. She felt the room closing in on her, and even as she relayed the story to me, she experienced the urge for flight, to flee even our conversation and the scene of the event to protect herself. She thought she would need to quit and give up her executive role. She was crushed, imagining coming home to her daughter, who was studying to soon work in the very same industry. As a woman of color, she was most tormented by the thought of the same experience happening to her very own daughter in the future. She even thought she may need to redirect her daughter's career aspirations, given the reality of the industry. We unpacked what felt like a traumatic, career-ending experience at work, what felt like the climax of behaviors and conflict that had been brewing for months. By the end of our coaching session, she remembered who she was, her own identity, all the adversity she had already overcome to even get to this point. It anchored her in her own resilience and faith that she could rise above this too. Similar victories are shared by all of my clients, and I have experienced it too in my own career turnaround. So let's hop to today's podcast content and get you on your way to experiencing this also. When I use this term, work trauma, you may initially think, hey, I never experienced discrimination or abuse, but every business professional has experienced a perceived injustice or grave disappointment in their career. Then I find that series of events, it seems to follow us everywhere we go. I hear people share their work trauma at barbecues and cocktail parties, in the office during one-on-ones, with their family as a cautionary tale, or with friends as a war story. Or worse, the shame and disappointment feels so massive that they close down with the people they care about most, and they keep it to themselves. We tend to repeat these stories and come back to them over and over again because, frankly, we don't know how to make sense of them. Why did they ever happen in the first place? How am I supposed to ever find peace with this? Today, we are taking the topic of work trauma head on. We are going into that closet where the skeletons are together. Take my hand. You will be glad that we did by the end of this episode. We tend to carry work trauma with us, similar to other kinds of trauma that we experience. I picture it like baggage that we drag around from place to place, into bed at night, into the office in the morning, into dinner time with our family. It feels heavy and unruly. In my mind, it's not like a neat backpack that leaves us hands-free and mobile. It's more like luggage, multiple pieces of luggage, overstuffed with items spilling out of the zippers. So, we move a little slower. We're distracted, accounting for all these pieces of luggage as we try to move forward. It feels heavy. It feels unruly. It feels cumbersome. It feels exhausting. It starts to make us wonder whether trying to move forward is even worth it. Maybe it's easier to just stay put. It's too heavy to carry and walk. Take a deep breath here. No matter what your trauma is, I want you to imagine it as this luggage, sure. But you and I today are going to stack it up in front of you in a neat pile. And then you are going to take my hand while you climb to the top of that pile. And all that trauma that weighed you down and held you back and kept you stuck for so long is now going to serve a purpose. Standing atop all that trauma baggage, you will have brand new and broader perspective, seeing both the road from which you came and the way forward far more clearly. And when you have got that clarity and that vision, you're going to come back down and we are going to move forward together without that baggage. You will feel lighter and freer, but also wiser with that new perspective. Winston Churchill said, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." With any trauma, work, and beyond, we can learn from this experience in our past. What I see more often than not, though, is using that history against ourselves, determining that we are doomed to repeat it no matter what we do. When it comes to our careers, I find most often that history does repeat itself. And here's the surprising reason why. Because we believe that it will. We are opening up our past work trauma today to prevent it from happening again. Trauma in our personal lives often become generational patterns, a sealed fate, what can start to feel like a curse, tough circumstances that happen generation after generation. This is no mystery. This happens based on a passed down set of beliefs, or more specifically, a set of limiting beliefs that may even be subconscious. At the root is not feeling capable or worthy of better circumstances and results. So, the pattern is repeated and the trauma happens again, whether it's landing in an abusive relationship and getting stuck in it, or spiraling in financial debt, or miserable marriages with constant bickering, or a million other versions of suffering that we can watch repeat generation after generation. Back to trauma at the office. Maybe the struggles you have faced in your work were also experienced by prior generations in your family, or maybe not. Maybe you were the first to go to college and land in business. Maybe you were the first to run a business. Maybe you picked up habits from those that went before you, like people-pleasing the boss or despising work as an unattractive chore. No matter the flavor of trauma that's weighing you down, I will borrow a quote from my original coach here. "A generational curse ran in my family until it ran into me." We can be the disruptor. The pattern stops here. What if you were meant to break out of the pattern and halt it from impacting all the future generations to come? What an opportunity for you, and what a legacy to leave. This is not fairy tale or fantasy. This is what we do in coaching. In other cases, our personal trauma may follow us into the office. If you were bullied and felt like an outsider as a child, maybe that baggage comes with you into the office. Maybe your family experienced financial distress from their country's economy collapsing, and now you might feel a certain way about job and financial security. If you find the living conditions in your current country far superior than that of your home country, maintaining your job and sponsorship to stay may feel like a life or death situation. This baggage, these high stakes, are so helpful to be aware of. It's like disarming a bomb. We've got to know it's there first, so we know to locate it and carefully disarm it. Without doing that, we will be haunted by the ticking countdown and fear of the explosion or implosion. A third type of work trauma may be unique to you, not related to family generations or to personal trauma experienced outside of work. Some trauma is more bespoke and may have only come up for you or happened to you and/or your colleagues in the moment. Here are examples: inappropriate language, physical gestures or contact, being mocked or called out disrespectfully, relegated to subservient tasks far under title and role, threats to physical safety or job security, rooting against your success and predicting your failure, betrayal by managers or colleagues by speaking poorly about you without giving you the courtesy of direct feedback, discrimination based on gender, color of skin, age, or any other protected class, socioeconomic judgment or bias. As I share this list, my mind flashes to my own personal experiences and that of clients, colleagues, and friends. Sadly, this is not an exhaustive list. What can be most problematic about how this arises in the workplace is the existence of hierarchy, the exchange of money for employee service, the importance placed on earning and job status. It all weaves together an environment ripe for abuse of power, intimidation, and exclusion. Today, we are empowering you with the tools to not sit quietly and accept bad behavior in your career. We are giving a voice to victims, to all of us, and a toolkit to emerge from trauma stronger and wiser. As you call to mind your own work trauma, the thoughts that may accompany it are, why me? This shouldn't have happened. I should have been treated with more respect. A difficult but eye-opening question to ask yourself instead is, why should it have happened to you? This can feel like a real mind bender. Our first reaction is there is no way it should have happened. It was wrong. It hurt me. It affected my work and me personally in all these ways. I know, I really do. But it helps to point your brain to find the value in it having happened, even if it was inherently wrong and you wished it never happened. What wisdom did you gain? Maybe you learned what not to do in a position of authority. Maybe you gained a level of empathy for other professionals. Maybe you gained a level of empathy for other professionals who had to endure similar trauma. Maybe you learned how never to let that happen to you again. Part of us holding tightly to this baggage is the sentiment that this never should have happened. Something went very wrong and we wish we could undo it. Finding the learning, the value in the experience, is what loosens our grip on that luggage. How do you see things differently now, having experienced that? What might you do differently to create an environment where that never happens on your watch? How can sharing that experience empower and inform others to avoid and prevent it? How are you stronger, and what positive attributes did that experience cultivate in you? These are powerful questions that you can answer, even if at first your mind resists going there. We sometimes want so badly to be right that we resist acceptance and unlocking the valuable wisdom that comes with every difficult experience. It may feel hard to do this, but I urge you not to waste that trauma, not to waste that challenge without recognizing what you gained from it. Start small. Maybe you are prepared when someone uses inappropriate language towards you in a derogatory way, to know exactly how to respond in a calm, firm, and constructive manner that immediately diffuses conflict and marks the card of your perpetrator in a chilling way that halts that behavior from ever happening again. Maybe when you are doubted or relegated to tasks that are below you, think being singled out as the only woman in the boardroom, so you take the notes, book the meeting, or order the food. I've been there, ladies. Maybe now you know that a fitting response is to call out the assumption made and the bias and reassign that task yourself. There are so many situations and scenarios that you may have experienced or witnessed. I see you. You are not alone, and we stand together. I have walked this road myself. In fact, it was a big driver in doing the work I do now to empower and support business professionals in their careers. Help that we could all use. I share my journey in vivid and personal detail in a video of my own origin story and what drives me in the work I do now to help business people love their work and their lives. I'm dropping the link in the show notes as well, but here it is, www.sherrygregov.com/my-story. This is but one of my horror story turned victory story retellings, and it is the next tool that I offer up to you. The version of our work trauma that we like to tell ourselves, retell, repeat, relive in our imagination, project onto our current situation, it's often the horror story. In fact, the more time that passes since the actual event, the worse the details may become, the more dire the circumstances, as we recall the event in our minds time and again. Like we might exaggerate a story for effect when relaying it to someone else, as we replay it in our minds, it can subconsciously become exaggerated, and how it made us feel actually get worse. My invitation to you today is to rewrite the version of the story that you tell yourself, to shift it from horror story to victory story. The ending of the story is known, and whether relatively or on an absolute basis, it was a victory story. You lived to face another day, as evidenced by you being here right now. You overcame the adversity. When you are buried in the horror of the story, you may not even be able to recognize or identify the triumph in it. It's time to find it. This is how we let go of the baggage. This is how we take that horror story that may dominate our thoughts and limit our potential, and we put it down. This is how we lay down that heavy burden that we have carried around with us for so long. Here is an exercise that I take my clients through. Imagine you are asked to speak to a group of young people who may have experienced that very trauma or are likely to face it in the near future. What would you say to inspire and strengthen them? What would be your message of hope? How would you share your own experience in a way that recognizes the challenge, normalizes it for your audience, and arms them to face it and persevere, not just to survive, but to thrive despite it? This isn't an exercise that I learned in a textbook or in a class. It was a real-life exercise that I lived. I was asked to speak to a group of young people with a background similar to mine who were on the verge of breaking some generational curses and shattering some glass ceilings to pursue meaningful work that had the chance to drastically change the quality of their futures. As I began to tell my story, I knew innately that relaying the horror story was not what they needed. They had lived it, were living it, or knew it was likely ahead of them already. They knew the level of difficulty and that no one wants to experience that trauma. So the version of the story that came out of me instead was compassion for the challenges, that it is more common than any of us would wish, but that we have the strength inside of us to use each step of that challenge to grow, to rise to the occasion, to find a way, to pursue opportunities, to receive the support and the blessings that would follow without turning away from them and deeming ourselves unworthy of them, thereby perpetuating our struggle. I offered a tale of hope of what it can be like on the other side of that trauma. How to cope, how to break out, what to do with that new wisdom, how to help others and pay it forward. The same message that those young people needed to hear is the message that you need to hear and recognize now, the upgraded version of your work trauma story. How have you emerged stronger, wiser, and better equipped from the work trauma you experienced? How will you do things differently? How will you cultivate a better way and a better place? This rewriting of our trauma is what shifts our identity from victims of our external circumstances to stronger, wiser victors that rose out of adversity. Don't avoid the trauma, resist it, or fight it when it's already done. You don't need to make it mean that you did something wrong or that you are destined to have it repeat. Find the lesson. Find the value. Don't waste the struggle by not pulling the good out of it. And just like how a victory story to others experiencing the trauma can inspire them to push through to emerge stronger on the other side, you can experience this yourself. This is how we put the bags down. This is how we see the broader perspective by standing on top of them. This is how we release the past to create a better future for ourselves. Let's revisit some common types of trauma that come up in the office and flip them to empower you to create a better future. We already touched on a couple, but I will include them in the lineup of solutions here for a comprehensive list. First, for situations where you feel that you are not being treated with respect, whether you are experiencing this live right now in your work or recalling an experience from your past, this may include inappropriate language used in a derogatory way. Language can be used in an attempt to assert power and potentially to make someone else uncomfortable. Physical gestures or contact. Maybe the colleague lingered just a little too long, or wanted to hug to celebrate, or wanted to probe your personal life, or connect in unprofessional ways. Mocked or called out. Maybe you were highlighted as the only member of the opposite sex, or the only member of a certain generation, publicly and time after time, pointing out exactly why you don't belong or might be viewed as sport by your colleagues. Socioeconomic judgment or bias, with remarks on your class, upbringing, connections, or lack thereof. Threats to physical safety or job security. Maybe on your first day on the job, you were threatened that if you didn't deliver, you would be terminated immediately. Maybe someone made a throwaway comment about inflicting physical harm on you if you didn't deliver on a work task. You have rights as a human and as a professional. When disrespect is getting out of hand, the growth moment is to speak up and not just accept it. I find it best to sink down into a calm and constructive place, then to speak up firmly and confidently that this is inappropriate and it is making you feel uncomfortable is usually enough to stop this from continuing. By taking your energy to a rock-solid, almost quiet place, it immediately emphasizes the less controlled, volatile words or actions of others, and it marks the card of your perpetrator in that chilling way that generally halts that behavior from happening again. If retaliation occurs, you escalate. If the trend continues, you escalate. Now, escalating does not mean career suicide. After calling it out and the behavior continuing, when raised to be constructive rather than relationship ending, there can be a good outcome without blowback. If this happened long ago, take these lessons today and reiterate here and now what behaviors you won't tolerate and how to gracefully elevate the level of respect in whatever situation you find yourself in. The second category is bias and discrimination. Maybe you have watched protected class after protected class, women, minorities, aging talent, be held to different standards and asked to leave or passed over for promotion by a majority population who seem threatened or particularly short on tolerance, patience, or interest in growing and developing talent from those demographics. Maybe you are watching this happen around you or experiencing it yourself, including others rooting against your success and predicting your future. Discrimination based on gender, color of skin, age, or any other protected class may look like, as a woman, being held to different standards than your colleagues, being told how to dress, wear your hair, paint your nails, accessorize by a man. Maybe you were told you have sharp elbows and are difficult to work with. Maybe you were called the B word to your face or behind your back. While men were excused of their interpersonal conflict challenges because somehow there the business value added outweighed the costs. Maybe you were relegated to subservient tasks far under your title and role because your skills seemed to be doubted over and over again. If you are in a position of power, speak up and say, do we really think we are giving everyone a fair chance here? The data trend seems to indicate there is something else at work. How do we fix this? About the subservient tasks, a fitting response is to call out the assumption made, point out the bias, and reassign that task yourself. If this is a live issue for you, take dated notes of details happening so that you have them if there is ever a question in the future about exactly what occurred. Decide whether you want to speak up and work to change the conditions, or if you want to move on. There is no single right answer. This is a personal decision that only you can decide. And if this happened in the past, consider what you learned from it. What will you not tolerate in the future? What are the bright line indicators that a line has been crossed? How did that experience inform you to be wiser for the future? How has your situation improved since then? What are all the ways that you are recognized and celebrated where you work now? How do you contribute to a better work environment and a better future for those around you and in generations to come? Last, feeling shortchanged on your potential or performance. Maybe it felt personal if there was a perceived betrayal by managers or colleagues of speaking poorly about you without giving you the courtesy of direct feedback. Or maybe you were underestimated and told to be quiet and pipe down. If this is a live situation, consider what it would be like to speak up. If the conditions are such that you want to look elsewhere, with nothing to lose, do you speak up anyway to make it better here, to know exactly how to stack this current opportunity up against potential future ones? Again, there's no right answer, just a decision to make, commit to, and move forward with. You decide, and you don't let this dictate what happens in the next chapter of your career. If those experiences happen in the past, maybe you were demoted or laid off, and the shock, rejection, and failure that you felt has left you reeling and playing it small to never experience it again. This is a decision point. Will you allow that experience to define you, to limit you and put you in a box for the rest of your career? Or can you spot the opportunity in what may at first feel like a crisis? How was ending this work relationship for the best? What might it be opening up room for next? What would you do differently in the future? What else is there to learn before you close that door and open a new one? These are uncomfortable places to explore, I admit, but the only thing more uncomfortable is leaving that work trauma unresolved to replay and haunt you long after it is over. If you are in a situation that feels extreme right now, get support to help you put the baggage down and take a broader perspective, to make a decision to stay or go. If your traumatic work experience is in the past, it is truly over and a brighter future awaits. Don't let it get clouded by ancient history. Take the lesson and leave the rest. I have walked this road and guided many others through this process. The support is there for you, for me or others. I invite you to take advantage of it now and start having a very different work experience without the baggage of work trauma. Know that I am sending you all the compassion and well wishes as you boldly take on the tough topics at hand. This is the difficult work that has the significant payoffs. Let's get it done together. Until next time.
Looking for support in applying the principles and strategies in today's episode? Sherry coaches clients one-on-one as their trusted confidant and advisor, helping each client create the work and life they had only dreamed of. To schedule your complimentary career strategy session, go to sherrygregoff.com/apply to book time with her today. It's one simple step that can change everything.